Hello, this is Georgina Rose, and welcome back to the Dr. Darling YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss everything on the fringe of esoterica and mysticism. I am your host, Georgina Rose, part-time esoteric content creator and part-time surfer of the aethers. And in this video, I'm actually going to be talking about something that's, a little different than what I often talk about, but I think this is such a recurring thing in metaphysical systems that it warrants a video. And that is the idea of metaphysical ages, cycles, and time. So in pretty much every religion, there is some form of this system. It goes by a lot of different names. And some of them, I'm guessing you guys are incredibly familiar with. But why they exist, what purpose they serve, and what they mean, now that's not really understood. I think most people have heard these terms like Kali Yuga, Aeon of Horus, Age of Aquarius before. People often know them in a very surface level with a very simple meaning. Like people are like, oh, Age of Aquarius means hippy dippy psychedelic fun time, or Kali Yuga means very bad period of time, right? But it's actually a lot more complicated. And so I'm going to get into this. I'm going to talk about the different versions of these metaphysical time systems, what they mean, why people use them, and where we are based on these different systems, and how do they all come together, and what does that mean for modern life? So I'd like to start with the one that people are most familiar with, and that is astrological ages. Specifically, I want to start with this idea of the age of Aquarius. So basically what that is basically when we look at astrology, these planets move around, right? We understand this. We understand that every year, there's a whole rotation through all the signs because of the sun. But in reality, there's so many different things in astrology, so many planets, so many constellations, that for astrology to fully go all the way through every single thing that happens in astrology, it actually takes an incredibly long time. And that is where we get the term of precession of the ages, which is basically every time it runs through absolutely everything it can possibly go through. And that is really an incredibly long amount of time. That is a little over 25,000 years. And so to be in an age of X, age of Aquarius, age of Pisces, age of Scorpio, that lasts for 25,000 years. Which people often are like, oh, well, that was just the 60s, now we're in a different age. So I want to get into that. The big debate is whether we are in the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces. And why are there two different versions of this? So astrologically, there are multiple astrological systems. And in the minute amount of time, it doesn't really make a lot of differences. The oldest system would be using this thing called whole sign houses, which is where like first house would be sun, and basically like each house in a chart is one planet. And as time went on, things like Placidus became a thing, and then they look a little different. So if you've ever had someone look at your natal chart, you'll know that depending on what astrologer there are, there might be minor changes. Typically, this is just like what house something is, or like specific, degrees or oppositions, like minor stuff. But if you have specific days, it could change your sign entirely. And so when we think about how all these little changes would add up over those 25,000 years, we're going to see big variances, especially if we're looking at tropical versus sidereal calculations. So tropical calculations is using basically a season-based understanding. So like the first day of Aries would be the same day every year, versus sidereal is based on the actual position of the constellation, which means it's a little bit different. And then there is Vedic. I do want to separate sidereal and Vedic because Vedic does use a sidereal calculation, but when we're talking about sidereal astrology in a Western context, it is just using that timekeeping superposed onto Western astrology instead of onto Vedic astrology, which is actually very different. They're entirely different language used and different. It's very different when you look Vedic versus tropical, but that also you will see variances as well. And so we are arguably in the age of Aquarius or the age of Pisces, depending on how you actually calculate that. And so what an astrological age is when things are under that sign. So it'll be those general themes. So Aquarius, people often don't realize this is actually ruled by Saturn. It is known for these kind of eccentricities and this weirdness, but since it is a Saturnian thing, it still has all these principles of discipline, death, all that kind of stuff together. And so the real thing that I think matters when we look at astrological ages is what is that sign ruled by, right? If we were in an age of Aries, that would mean we are in an age ruled by Mars. And then that will continue as things move all the way through until it switches over, which is going to vary a little bit depending on what calculation system you use. However, there are other ways of looking at this besides astrological age. And I think the second system I'm going to talk about is the other one that you've probably heard a lot about, which is the Yugas. That does come from the Hindu world. So I think people are most familiar with the term Kali Yuga, right? And how that is often described to people is just really bad time where a lot of bad things happen, such a dark age, we are screwed. Now, what actually is the Kali Yuga? To understand the Kali Yuga, we have to understand what the Yugas are in general. So, looking different from the astrological one, we are actually not breaking it down based on astrological sign. We're breaking it down based on age itself. And basically, the thing about the Yugas is it's a cycle of 4 ages that continuously repeat, right? It's not like, all 12 signs you would run through. It's these 4 things and they're on loop. And basically what it is, it's the cycle of deterioration is probably the easiest way to explain it. We begin with the Satya Yuga. Excuse me if my pronunciation is incorrect. Obviously my first language is English. And that lasts for 1.7 million years. And basically under this yuga, everything is the best. It is the golden age. And it is generally defined as being closest to the gods, closest to divine law, and when beauty is the most established. Truth and beauty rule, reign, and it is a beautiful time. A lot of mystic revelations happen during this time. A lot of growth happens during this time. The best civilizations rise and thrive during this yuga. And then as it progresses through the next 3 after this one, there is progressive deterioration. So the next yuga is the Treta Yuga, which lasts for 1.2 million years. That's a little bit shorter than the first one. You're going to note that. You see, there's another thing in this where they get progressively shorter. And during this time, there is still a lot of beauty. There is still a lot of gorgeousness. There is still a lot of civilization and happiness and joy and things being morally right, but it's not as good as it was before. And the first thing that kind of slips is truth, right? Truth starts to deteriorate and lose meaning and things start to slowly fall apart. But fundamentally, the law of the gods is still in place. It is just starting to fall apart and starting to get, worse and worse. And these yugas can actually be subdivided into kind of smaller stages of them, which will matter the most when I get to the last yuga, which is the yuga that we are currently in. But basically, it's starting to decline, and it's going to progressively decline the further things go down. So the next yuga is the Dvarpa Yuga, which lasts for 864,000 years. So at this point, things are pretty bad. This yuga is when war, disease, pain, suffering become very pronounced. You're going to see these things happening on a wider scale, and you're going to see a lot of chaos in the macro of the world, right? You're going to see conflict, suffering, pain. It's everywhere. It's around you. And truth has been lost. Truth is no longer there. And there is an intense lack of beauty in the world. You see, in these ideologies, you have to understand beauty and goodness are kind of linked. And so when beauty is missing, so is goodness. So let's get to where we are now in this cycle. So the final yuga and where we are now is the Kali Yuga, the one you've probably heard of. And we, according to most Hindu calculations, have been in the Kali Yuga for about 5,000 years, and there are 400,000 years left. So things are just really kicking off. And basically the Kali Yuga is when truth is completely lost, beauty is completely lost, people are disconnected from the gods, people are confused. A lot of mystic revelations people are having are not real mystic revelations. A lot of people are getting into religion and spirituality for the wrong intentions. Let's say they only have a practical based practice instead of doing any mysticism to get close to the gods. Divine law is completely missing. And as the Kali Yuga progresses, the night gets darker and darker and darker until the end of the Kali Yuga, in which there is this big sort of chaotic overthrow of power. Everything changes, and then we are thrust back into that first yuga. I think this cycle can best be understood as kind of a more complicated version of the Jungian idea of life, death, rebirth, right? You live during the first yuga, you start to die through the next 2, and then you are reborn in the Kali Yuga into something new. But of course, things must reach their darkest place to go to the next stage. If you think about the progression of the mystic as understood in Western esotericism, you will know that you go through all these spheres, and then you have to cross the abyss and undergo the dark night of the soul in order to become an epistemic and reach a state of complete revelation and unity and connection to the highest force. So it's kind of that. What's so interesting about mysticism and esotericism is what happens in our internal life also happens in the external world, right? Everything is a macrocosm and a microcosm of each other. And so all these processes that we go through as individuals on the mystic path, the world and the universe as a whole goes on its mystic path as well. So let's move to a more Western system that you also might have heard of that I think is worth discussing as well. And this would be the progression of the Aeons. So this is talked about in several mystic systems in the West. It does not belong to a singular one. It's brought up a lot in Hermeticism. You see this kind of language used by various Gnostic sects. You see it very pronounced in Thelema. You see it in Theosophy. All of these kind of Western esoteric systems use a version of this. I'm going to explain it in kind of the simple form. The thing about this one is it's much less clearly divided based on years. Certain systems have posited very specific years for this, but that's not universally agreed on exactly. It's kind of argued, and I'll get into some of the disagreements about this as I get through them. So in this system, your first Aeon is going to be the Aeon of Isis, as it is often called. And basically the Aeon of Isis is the age of the pagan cult, the age of the goddess, the age of the divine feminine, the age of earth-based spirituality, right? This is kind of your ancient cultures who were very connected to their ancestors and to the goddess and to the gods, and having this very like nature-oriented spirituality. This is when paganism ruled. This would have been before the rise of the Abrahamic religions. Technically, the rise of Judaism would be included under this Aeon, but Judaism kind of sparked the next Aeon, so it's kind of between the two. But this is basically when most people were pagan, right? And the world had these very specific kind of localized, civilizationalized based religions. Now, if we look at the paganism of this time, we do understand that even though people were different pagan religions, so to speak, and they worshiped different gods, they did understand that the other systems had their own gods. Interestingly, Rome had a lot of weird laws about this, about like basically foreign gods, where they would say that the foreign gods are real, but as a Roman citizen, you should not worship the foreign gods. It was a whole kind of discourse at the time. And then other civilizations had a very different view, where people who traveled would have various talismans and reliefs from foreign gods. We found some really cool archaeological explorations and discoveries of like certain relics that are dedicated to specific gods in countries where that god definitely would not have been. So we can, extrapolate that foreign god worship was allowed. Big debate at that time. But basically you had these pagan cults all around the world. And then from there comes the age of Osiris, the Aeon of Osiris, which is when Abrahamicism really kicks off. Specifically, this Aeon is begun in most calculations with the rise of Christianity and the birth of Jesus. That's when most people mark this Aeon. Now, there are some people who do calculate it further back and say Judaism is the beginning of this, or even, something that kind of preludes to monotheism, because there were like other kind of monotheistic religions and cults before Judaism. Judaism did not invent monotheism, so that's where you get some debating about this. But basically, the Aeon of Osiris is the Aeon of the divine masculine, of the father god, and of monotheism. And you see a lot of the philosophical and legal kind of things that go along with monotheism being pronounced during this Aeon, and society being divided based on those lines. Now, when you get a little further into the future, this arguably would begin with the Enlightenment. I've heard one person place it with even the Protestant Reformation. Other people place this way later and say that the Victorian occult revival had a lot to do with this, or even Thelema or Wicca or whatever. Aeon of Horus, we're talking about the Aeon of Horus. So this is the Aeon of kind of individual spirituality, alternative religious belief sets. A lot of the stuff people kind of say are the Age of Aquarius. Now, I think Aeon of Horus describes the phenomenon of Age of Aquarius better than what actually the Age of Aquarius means astrologically, because that is Saturnian and this is Martial. So I think this is more what people are thinking about when they're like the New Age, really more people are talking about. Now, I'm not saying any of these movements are New Age. They're not. New Age is a specific philosophical paradigm, but I mean the New Age is a broad, like, cultural idea, like a new age of new beliefs, not literally like the New Age movement as a derivation of new thought and theosophy. So this whole period is this age of individual revelation, but it is also an age of chaos. And so you get some of these ideas from the Kali Yuga coming back in. There's a force and fire to this Aeon. It's very martial, and there's a lot of conflict, war, realignments, all this stuff kind of goes with this period of time. Now, arguably, this period of time is over. Rudolf Steiner was a big arguer of this. Steiner is, of course, in that broader theosophy kind of tradition world. He thought this was over, and we were in this period called the Aeon of Mott, which is a period of renewed harmony, a new order, new society, new everything. I do not think that makes sense, because I do not think society has reached a place of harmony. I think we don't fit that description at all. There's several other groups that think this is where we're at. If you think modern life is harmony, look out the window, go on CNN.com. No, it's clearly not. There's a lot of war, conflict, chaos, disorder, distress in the world around us. So I do not believe it is possible that we are in the Aeon of Mott. I don't think that makes sense. That is a fringe theory, but I do want to bring it up as it is believed by some people, and thus it is relevant to this discussion, even if I think it is a theory that doesn't quite make sense. So now we've got all these systems kind of out of the way. Other religions don't break it down this literally, but kind of have this similar idea. In Christianity, obviously there is the age before Jesus and then after Jesus and then the age of revelations, right? They don't cut it like that or phrase it like that, but like that's what's going on. In Judaism, there is this idea of the Messianic age, which is when they believe their Messiah is going to come, and so that's a new age. Same kind of idea. In Islam, you have the age before Muhammad, and then all the things that are going to come during the end times. In ancient Roman religion, you had the idea of, ancient Greek religion, I misspoke, my apologies. But the idea actually does exist in Roman religion too, which is phrased a little differently, of the golden age of Kronos and then the age of the Olympian gods. There's a lot of interesting mythology about when the Titans ruled versus when the gods ruled, and was the age of the Titans this amazing golden age, or was it not? Them being overthrown, ushering in new times, all of that. So you get those type of ideas as well. This is really a universal concept. It's broken down so differently depending on religions. So let's try to reach a conclusion based on all this information in all of these religions. What's going on? What does this mean about modern life? I think the most common thread throughout all of this is that we are in an age of chaos and change. We are in an age of radical restructuring and of it being a whole hot mess. And something needs to happen to get us out of this hot mess and bring us back into a golden age. I think that's the most consistent idea across these traditions. Now, what will that be? I don't know. I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. But it does seem that is probably going to happen at some point. Will it be soon? If you like Western metaphysics, probably. If you like non-Western metaphysics, here's to 400,000 years of chaos. Probably the least inspiring message I've ever put at the end of my videos. But you know, even if we do have 400,000 years left of chaos, what can we do in our personal spiritual lives? So, even if you live in a really dark age, you are able to connect to the gods, you are able to do all these things. It is just a hell of a lot harder than if we were in a different time period. It's much more of an uphill battle, and the things you need to do seem counter to our culture, our lifestyle, and our world. So you just have to be willing to push yourself and make it work. So that's my message for you guys. I hope this makes sense. What of these theories makes the most sense to you? Definitely comment it below. I'm very curious what people have to say. I think this is so interesting because there's another dimension of this of, you know, these periods we're in right now, like, yeah, they're chaotic, but in a way it is a new order. And so you could possibly see it in a very positive way, but a positive, chaotic way. Kind of like when an eclipse happens and then it cancels and gets rid of something in your life that needed to go. So we'll see. I'm very curious what people have to say. And yeah, if you want to support me and get more videos, please join the Patreon. You get an extra video every month. You get my ritual guides every month, which are like guides on how to do mysticism and stuff. They're really cool. And if you're high enough tier, you get to meet with me once a month to talk about your practice, your journey, and all of that. It's really cool. I'm also hosting a group trip to India with Trova Trip. You can sign up. There's still discounted slots for people who are signing up now. So very exciting stuff. We're going to go to India. It's going to be super, super fun. And you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, Substack, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. I think that's everything. It's all linked below, but I'm really everywhere. I just exist in cyberspace endlessly. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Please like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you subscribe for 93 days, you'll meet your guardian angel, and you'll never need to know any of these things again, and you'll be automatically thrust into the golden age, and the Kali Yuga will end miraculously and magically, and that's definitely how it works. Yeah, definitely just not trying to get that subscription. Anyways, bye, and see you guys in the next one. Have a nice day, afternoon, mid-morning, mid-evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are.